Right, in this week's magazine, we've got features with and interviews with Amir Khan and Danny Garcia, who we mentioned both men earlier. Amir Khan really had to get motivated for this fight, but they've done well to find Danny Garcia in an opponent, haven't they, Tris?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think at short notice, there aren't many unbeaten world champions that would step up to the plate, and there aren't many promoters that will put their unbeaten world champion in with someone who's really a favourite to beat them. So yeah, it's a good match, particularly when you consider it being at short notice. But and I think it could unfold into a good fight in the ring as well. I think Garcia's tough. He can punch a bit with the left hook. He's gritty, determined. He's got, we mentioned in the magazine interview, he's got the heritage from Philadelphia and Puerto Rico, and he kind of brings a little bit of both fighting styles into the ring with him. And you've got Khan, who in his interview says how much he loves to brawl and fight, which is the case. When Amir's hurt, he digs in and fights back. So there's good ingredients for a nice fight there.
Do you think there's any danger that Amir could underestimate him, or not underestimate, but do you think there's any? Certainly Peterson brought more to the table than we expected. We can all kind of debate about the reasons for that, but do you think Garcia can spring an upset?
It's possible, yeah. In a way, it's a tricky fight for Khan because Garcia isn't that well known as compared to some of the other fighters in the division. People are expecting Khan to win, and probably to win impressively. If Khan does win, maybe like a close points decision or a debatable points decision, then people will say, oh, Khan's over the hill, or is not as good as we thought he was. So in a way, Khan probably has more to prove, more to lose in this fight than Danny Garcia does, because he's young, unbeaten. If he loses narrowly to Khan, people can say, oh, well, maybe inexperience told, Khan has various title fights before. So in a way, Garcia probably has coming into on more of a crest of wave than Khan is in this fight. He has less to lose. So.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll see that. You'll see the determination of both fighters in this week's issue in both of those separate features. There's another feature where Jack Hirsch, over in the USA at the Hall of Fame, Canastota in New York, he always seems to enjoy it there. He always gets up to some bits and bobs over there, racing fighters. I believe he was doing this time. Went on a bit of a run and left a few top name fighters from past and present embarrassed. But the Hall of Fame, it is a fantastic place, isn't it? I mean, Dan, what do you think it means to fighters of today? Because the likes of Freddie Roach has gone there and said, this is, after everything I've achieved, this is the best day of my life. Thomas Hearn said a similar thing. Every time fighters go there and they're inducted, it's almost as if that's the end goal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great recognition for them, particularly in the modern era of boxing, where we have so many sort of world titles or supposed world titles floating around. People can win 2-3 world titles and figure in big fights, and people will say, oh, he's not really a champion because he didn't fight the rival champion. So to actually be inducted in the Hall of Fame and actually get up there on the days and among all these other great fighters, that really is validation of what you've done, of all the work you put in for, could be 20, 30, 40 years. Freddie Roach is 50 odd now, been in boxing since he was a kid. All those decades of work and preparation, achievement now means something. He's up there with other great fighters.
Tris, you get the ballots through and you're involved in the selection process. Is there anybody that's screaming out to be inducted? There's names. There's British guys, Nassim Hamed, who's on the ballot now. Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank, who they're not on the ballot. I think I'm correct in saying that. But you also go back through Lupe Pintor. He hasn't been inducted. There's guys like that haven't been inducted. Is there someone there that you'd really like to see get in there?
Not really, not at the moment. There's no massive name that stands out that hasn't been inducted. I think you're right. I think the ones that jump out are the ones that haven't even made the ballot, particularly Nigel Benn, where you would have thought maybe in Canastota in New York, the International Boxing Hall of Fame might have had some American influence. And Nigel Benn, I think, had greater impact on America than Chris Eubank because of wins over Iron Barkley, Doug DeWitt, and obviously the tragic McClellan fight. You would have thought that Nigel Benn would have made the list or made the ballot by now, because he did have an outstanding career. But aside from that, the guys who put the list together are very knowledgeable historians and very knowledgeable boxing experts, and so they completely impartial, which obviously gives it so much credibility over everyone else. It's not like you can campaign to get someone inducted in there. You're either good enough or you're not to get on the ballot, and ultimately, these guys hold all the cards as to who gets in and who doesn't. But in my personal opinion, I'd like to see Nigel Benn on the ballot. Whether Nassim Hamed goes in or not, I think it will depend on how busy that year is. So, for example, I think next year it could. I might be right, I might be wrong. It could be De La Hoya and Joe Calzaghe. Maybe Calzaghe would be the year after that, but I couldn't see Naz getting in ahead of those guys. But then there could be a quieter year where more recent great fighters haven't retired, and just due to the weight of numbers, then he could get in.
Yeah.
I don't think there'd be much of an argument about Naz. I think this is one of the interesting things about the Hall of Fame is that there is a set criteria. It's generally down to achievement, which you can't argue with, with someone's credentials in that respect. But I also think you need to weigh in, and this is a personal opinion, you need to weigh in their impact in boxing. I think Nassim should go in for his impact in boxing as well as his record. I think what he did for boxing in this country on ITV and then through Sky was spectacular. He brought us into the modern generation. It's the same reason why I think Barry McGuigan got inducted, not just because of his outstanding achievements in the ring, but for what he did in terms of uniting Ireland. You could make a case for the same thing for Jeff Fenwick being such a massive figure in Australia. And you could say the same thing about Ricky Hatton, whether he does or doesn't get inducted for what he did in the ring. I think what should tip him over the edge is the impact he had with the fans and the rapport he had with the fans, and that he could take 30,000 people to Las Vegas and stuff. And I think you need to wrap all that up into their careers as well, personally.
Yeah. I mean, this week I look at the current top 10 pound for pound and wonder whether any of those guys are gonna then make the jump to Canastota in the future. I mean, obviously, I think whatever happens now with Pacquiao and Mayweather, they're more or less locks to get there done. What about the likes of Andre Ward and Nonito Donaire and things like that? Do you think they're set for a spot in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah. Well, it's always hard to judge somebody when their career hasn't ended because we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Ward might lose to Dawson, might lose badly. I mean, it's unlikely. It could be a close fight, but so you never quite know. That's why you have to wait.
Yeah.
The 5-year waiting period, which is a good idea. The 5 years after their last fight. So you'd have some perspective when coming to judge what exactly they achieved or didn't achieve. But Pacquiao Mayweather definitely going in, yes.
Yeah. I mean, you've been at Boxing News for a long time, and you would have been here when Nassim was kind of coming up through the ranks. I mean, have you got any favourite Nassim memories or any fights in particular where you thought, wow, this guy is something special or something else?
Bizarre way, maybe he didn't quite achieve what we thought he would in the very early days, but when he was 18, 19, 20, you could see he was going to be a champion and he knew he was going to have an outstanding career, and he did. I mean, maybe he went off the ball a bit early for maybe out of the ring reasons, maybe didn't maintain his focus and discipline the way the real champion should have done, but some of those early wins, when he outclassed Steve Robinson to win the world title, and when he knocked out good quality fighters in defences, or even when he got off the floor to knock people out, that showed something special, that showed a real champion's quality to do that. So he was a special fighter, I think. Even if only for a small period of time, he did make a big impact on the sport.
Yeah. No, I remember it well. Okay, moving forward to next week's magazine, which is we're going to look in depth at the Derek Chisora David Haye heavyweight fight, which takes place July 14th, Upton Park. We've all got our views here at Boxing News about it. I think we all really agree that we quite like the fight, but we don't like the circumstances that surround it. Mickey Van's now in place to be the referee. It looks like Michael Buffer is going to be the ring announcer. Are either of you any more excited about it as time gets on?
Well, no more or less so than I was when it was first announced.
Yeah.
It's still one of those fights where you believe it when they get in the ring. I wouldn't be totally surprised if something happens, or inside or outside the ring, from one or other of the fighters, or the police or a governing body. Who knows what happened? I mean, I'll wait until I actually get in the ring to believe it's going to happen. But as a fight, if we leave aside all the shenanigans outside the ring and should it happen, as a fight, it's an interesting fight. I mean, Chisora's a very tough guy. David Haye has damaged his hands before. I mean, he might break his hand on Chisora's head in the first round. I mean, anything can happen in the fight. I mean, as a fight, it's an intriguing fight.
Do you think it's an important fight? If you take away an important fight in Britain, is it an important fight in the heavyweight division, Tris?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, David Haye's only not in our world rankings because he retired and then came out of the rankings, so I think he's still probably a top five heavyweight now. And Chisora's obviously proved himself now at world level with the fights over Robert Helenius and Vitaly Klitschko, definitely the Klitschko fight. So yeah, I think it does have wider implications, very much so. But kicking on from there in terms of how big implications it has, it depends on most likely how the winner looks. I mean, if one of them steamrolls the other, then that will have big implications, I guess. If it's a close fight and you know, maybe if it was close fights or an exit, you'd imagine they'd have a rematch, and then we've got another 6 months of it.
Well, we will look at that more in depth in next week's issue. We'll also look at the Amir Khan and Danny Garcia fight at greater level. But if you want to get this week's issue, it's boxingnewsonline.net/apps. You can get that on Wednesday. If not, you can get it on Thursday in the newsstands. And we'll see you next week for another edition of BNTV. Thanks very much, Dan, and thanks very much, Therese.